So I just want you to know that I consider myself the absolute foremost real estate expert. I believe if there was a real estate Jeopardy, I would win. I wouldn't get every question right. I wouldn't um, I wouldn't sweep every category, but I would sweep most categories. And let me tell you why. This is why I believe I would sweep more categories in real estate than anybody else, because it's experience. It's not because I'm smarter. It's not because I know more. It's because I've been doing it a very, very long time. I got my real estate license when I was 18. I took my real estate course when I was 17. I'm 55 now. I've had 38 years of experience. In that 38 years of experience, I've had over 25,000 real estate transactions. I've owned a big lending company, a title insurance company, a real estate company. I've bought and sold hundreds and hundreds of properties, flipped them, landlorded them, rented them. I was a banker for many years. I was the number one consumer lender in all of America for First Union Bank. I believe that qualifies me to know more than anybody else. I don't know everything, but I know more than everybody else. Because I've sat at every table at the closing table. I've sat at every seat at the closing table. There's not a seat that I haven't sat at. So if you have any questions, I promise you I will give it my best to answer all your questions. I got a couple different platforms right here. I've never done this. And the reason I'm doing this, the reason I thought I'm going to come on here and answer anybody's questions is I saw this guy and he said, you know, he was a real estate expert and he wanted to answer questions. So I asked him a question and he skipped by my question and he went on to the next question. So I thought, I'm going to ask him another question. And these were pretty basic questions that a real estate professional should know. The first question I asked is, how much are doc stamps on a deed? Now, he was in Florida. I'm in Florida. So I asked the question, how much were doc stamps on the deed? And he couldn't tell me. He could not tell me how much were doc stamps on the deed. And I thought to myself, well, that's interesting. You should know how much doc stamps are on the deed if this is what you're professing that you do for a living. He didn't know. So he obviously jumped past my question. Answered a few other ones, just stupid questions that, like, you know, anybody who has driven by a house should be able to answer. The next question I asked him, well, what's a Florida Form 9? And he couldn't answer that. And then we got to a series of other questions, and he just couldn't answer any of my questions. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to see if anybody has any questions out there. Now, I'm going to guess that most people won't be able to stump me. Most people will not be able to stump me. I believe I will answer every single question. I believe I will answer every single question to the best of my ability and to the best of almost anybody else's ability. Now, you might have some weird situation that you do in Tennessee or New York or Wisconsin that we don't do here in Florida, but we are in the free state of Florida. So I'm going to guess that I can answer every question. If you have questions, ask me the question. Be more than happy to. I come to you from Tampa Bay, Florida, where I've lived most of my life, and that's where I've practiced real estate. So if you have any questions, if you have any thoughts, a lot of people keep asking, well, what about this 50-year mortgage? Man, is that bad? Is the 50-year mortgage bad? Is a 50-year mortgage super, super bad? And I don't think it is. I don't think it is. I think a 50-year mortgage is nothing more than a tool that can be used by any potential lenders to entice customers or any potential buyer of a house or owner of a house to create some more flexibility and leverage when they are looking to either refinance or buy a house. It's nothing more than a tool, guys. For many years, there's been interest-only loans, and interest-only loan is a much more, I guess, harmful. I wouldn't even say that. It's going to get you less interest paid towards, and it's never going to end. It's never going to end. But the reality is that almost every mortgage is not held longer than 7 years. People are like, what do you mean it's not held longer than 7 years? It's not held longer than 7 years. Most people will not hold a mortgage longer than 7 years. A lot of people are like, but what about it's going to be 50 years? Somebody's going to be dead. You know, their grandkids are going to be dead. why do somebody need a 50-year mortgage? Well, the reason people need a 50-year mortgage is maybe just to get them that little bit more amount of debt to income ratio than they could have gotten with a 30-year mortgage. So, but a lot of people say, but what about it? They're going to keep it forever. They're going to keep it forever. They're going to keep their mortgage forever. It's never going to be paid off. Chances are in 7 years, that person will either refinance or sell the home. There is no real 50-year mortgage for most people. Now, there are a few select few, but if you look at how many people are out there, ask them, do you have the same mortgage you have when you bought your house? Most people will say, no, I don't have the same mortgage I have when I bought my house. I refinanced it when rates were better. I had to pull some equity out to put my addition on. I put some, equity, pulled some equity out to do whatever. So a lot of people will not keep a 50-year mortgage to its term. They just won't. They just won't. People move around, they downsize, they upsize, they get transferred in their jobs. The average person will not have the same mortgage in 7 years. So everybody's acting like this 50-year mortgage is like the end of financial prosperity as we know it, and it's going to destroy families. It's not going to destroy families. It's no different than an interest-only loan. If people go and get a line of credit on their house, that's just interest only. That goes forever, and there are interest-only loans. If you guys have any questions, put them up here. I'll try to answer them. But I need to stress with people that the 50-year mortgage is nothing more than a 50-year mortgage. It's just a loan. It's just a loan. And to give you an example, the typical $500,000 loan at 6% for a 30-year mortgage and a $500,000 loan for a 50-year mortgage at 6.25%, which is probably going to be like that if they actually do create a 50-year mortgage and it's mainstream. It's only going to save somebody $200 a month, but that $200 is huge when you're with a client or you're the person that has a very tight debt to income ratio and you just love that house, and that house would be the absolute greatest house you could ever have. So there's people out there like, man, I really want that house, and that's the house I really want. Or they want a slightly more expensive house, and they're just not within the bracket, and they just can't get under the guidelines to buy it. That's when a 50-year mortgage might be the right tool. So here's an example that I put up on one of my social medias. If you were looking at a 50-year mortgage, it's $2,800 for $500,000 at 6.25. If you were looking at a $500,000 purchase for a 30-year mortgage, it's $3,000 a month, which means it's $200 more. But if your debt to income ratio cannot allow you to pay $3,000, even if you can, even if you should, but you just, the guidelines won't allow it, then what if that person just says, you know what, I'm going to be a renter. I'm going to be a renter, and I'm going to go spend $1,000 less just renting. And if they do that for 7 years, the detriment to their finances is $250,000, guys. They will lose $250,000 in equity over 7 years, even if they're paying $1,000 less than if they were to get a 50-year mortgage. So a 50-year mortgage is not a bad thing. A 50-year mortgage is just a tool. It's no different than somebody saying, well, you shouldn't have a term life insurance policy because it offers no, they could cancel you anytime. You should only have a whole life policy or a variable life policy. There's no difference, guys. It's just a tool to create the ability to allow somebody to, buy a house, maybe buy that little nicer house, maybe buy a little nicer house than they would have been able to buy. Maybe buy that dream house. Maybe they're getting a better job and they know they're in a temporary position and next year they are on track to make more money, but they want this house today. So what? They go $2,400 in debt. Maybe they are, not accelerating their mortgages fast on a 30-year, but then all of a sudden they get a better job. They have more money. They can refinance to a 30. And that's where I go into, we don't keep the same mortgages. We don't keep the same mortgages for longer than 7 years on average. And being somebody who's been a realtor, been a financer, been a banker, I will tell you, most people in America, now it might not be you, but most people in America will strip mine their house every 4 or 5 years when they can. Because what they've done is they've gone out and they've bought the Land Rover. They got the big flat screen TV. They went on 3 trips. They got to pay for their kids' school. And they're like, oh my God, it's all coming. My American Express bill is now $35,000. I know I've got $200,000 in equity over the last 7 years. I'm going to pull from that. We're going to refinance the house at slightly better rate, and we'll put it all. We'll get a lower monthly payment overall. And that's the American way of doing things, guys. That's how Americans do things. So we need to understand. Did you know there's a 9-year car loan now? There's a 9-year car loan. 9 years. 9. Your warranties run out. The brakes are burned up. Your car's been smashed 3 times, but you're still paying. So if anybody out there has a problem with a 50-year mortgage, you need to really have a problem with a 9-year car loan. So anyways, guys, the 50-year mortgage is not terrible. 50-year mortgages are not terrible. They are just something that possibly might be in the best interest of the borrower. You might be thinking, my God, my wife really loves this house. I would move heaven and earth to get my wife this house. My kids love this neighborhood. It's right by their school. But I don't have the extra $200 a month. I don't have it. I can't manipulate it. And the lender won't give me the loan. And then somebody taps you on the shoulder a couple of years from now and says, hey, listen, why don't you get a 50-year mortgage? I can get a 50-year mortgage? Yeah, you can. It's kind of new, but you can get a 50-year mortgage because your debt to income ratio will now be down to where you can afford it. I assure you there's not a dad or a husband out there that wouldn't do that in order to make their family's lives better. So all I'm saying, guys, is a 50-year mortgage is not the end of the world. It's just simply a way to, get the house you want, the financial structure you want, or anything like that. The next question somebody asked me was, they were like, oh, I'm thinking about buying a house, but I'm going to buy a duplex so I can live in one of them and I can rent out the other side. Now, on the surface, that sounds wonderful, guys. That sounds absolutely wonderful. And in many cases, it is. In many cases, you can have your tenant pay for most of your mortgage and you can live rent-free. And you can leverage that, and then you can go buy another one. And you can do that every 2 years. You can do that every 2 years. But what people don't tell you, and is what I did when I first got married, we bought an old house that was cut up into a whole bunch of units. It was cut up into 6 units, this old big house. So we took 2 of them and we rented out the other 4. Okay. So now nowhere on the brochure about buying a duplex, a triplex, or a quadplex, or whatever, and that you're going to live in it. Nowhere on that brochure does it say, what if your tenant is a nightmare? What if your tenant creates complete chaos for you? What if your tenant has a lease and you can't get them out and they are a complete nightmare? Now, I know everybody says, oh, well, I would screen them. I would know. It would be my friend. It would be my, guys, I've seen it literally 1,000 times where a tenant of the owner lives next door to them. And then they get into something goes wrong somehow. Music played too loud. You parked on the lawn. You slammed your door. You have too many friends over. Things seem kind of sketchy. And all of a sudden, you're like sitting there like, oh my God, I own this place. I don't even want to come to my own house because I'm in such a nightmare. And yet, you can't get them out because they have a lease and they really haven't violated anything in the lease. There's that movie with Michael Keaton. I can't remember the name of it, where he becomes a nightmare for the people that own the house. He releases the cockroaches and everything. I don't remember the name of it, but I'm sure my friend Scott would know the name of it. So a lot of people talk about, buying a house and living there. So another thing that most people will never tell you about, you never hear Grant Cardone on these things talk about, oh, you need to buy 24 units and 4, and all these real estate investors, they tell you what you should do, but they don't tell you, some of the backstory and how you could have a quadplex and one tenant could completely destroy the whole thing, So if you're looking to buy, and I'm trying to convince my son when he gets out of college to buy a multifamily property so he can live in one of them and not live with us. You go, Bryce, you go. So I'm trying to convince him to live in one of them and rent the other one. Now, I will tell you, in full disclosure, my son doesn't take from anybody, so I'm not really concerned about him. But if you're kind of a milquetoast person and you you don't want to be in squabbles, you don't have a an alpha personality where you're going to control things, you could be having to deal with some problems there. So I would just say, if you're looking to buy a multifamily property and you're going to live in one of them, just remember, the person that you rent to is going to have just as much rights than you do once you sign that lease. Now, they can't do crazy things that violate the lease, but they can be not so great neighbors. And now you're right there. Now, if you've ever lived in an apartment building, and your next door neighbor sucks or the one above you is real loud, just remember, now it's on you. It's your problem. And you're going to have to solve it or deal with it however you see fit. Now, when the lease comes up, you can throw the person out or whatever, But I would just say, be warned that is kind of something you need to be considerate of. Another thing that people keep asking is, why don't interest rates go down when the Fed lowers rates? You probably wonder that too. Why doesn't the Fed go down? And I'm answering on YouTube too. Why doesn't the Fed go down? Why doesn't the interest rates go down when the Fed comes out and says, I'm going to lower rates a quarter of a point? Now, everybody out there that doesn't understand how this whole thing works is probably like, I don't know. Trump says he's going to lower rates, and Jerome lowers the rates, but my mortgage rate went up the next day. I was going to lock in. My mortgage guy said they're going to lower rates. And then they did lower rates. But your lock-in availability for a lower rate didn't happen because your mortgage person's a moron. Because your mortgage person doesn't understand how economics work. So I'm going to explain to you, because everybody always asks this, and I go on and I do all these panels and things like this, and I explain to my customers and my clients why interest rates don't go down when the Fed lowers interest rates. Now, the Fed has lowered interest rates about 0.75% in the last few months. But rates haven't gone down that much. And let me tell you why, guys. Because there is a limited amount of money in the market. And that money is in one of a couple places. How's it going? That money is in a couple places. It's either in equities, which is the stock market, which, is when you look at the S&P 500, the Dow. So the money is in equities. It's in, General Motors stock. It's in Walmart stock. It's in Meta stock, whatever company that it's in. It's in ETFs. It's in mutual funds. It's whatever. So there's that money. And then there's bond money. So I want you to understand why when Jerome lowers the rate, why it doesn't affect your mortgage rate. And nobody will explain this to anybody because they're stupid. They don't understand it. But once again, after 38 years and owning a big mortgage company, I understand it. What's that say? What do you think NVIDIA will hit at the end of the year? I don't know. My son day trades. He's been day trading since he was 12. That's not my world. I live in the real estate world. I hold tangible assets. I'm not a Bitcoin person. I don't know. I'm just going to explain to you why rates don't go down when Jerome lowers the rates for the Fed market. So what happens is Jerome comes out and he says, we're going to lower interest rates for the Federal Reserve through the discount window by 0.25%. Everybody's like, it's going to be 0.25% less. Now, if you have a line of credit, it'll be 0.25% less. If you need a car loan, it might be less, but it won't be less for your mortgages because mortgages are tied to the 10-year Treasury bonds, okay? In most cases, mortgages are tied to the 10-year Treasury bonds. Now, I want you to think about this for a minute, okay? The Treasury bonds are being sold constantly, and they need to be replenished, so we can have our debt go up and all that, and I'm not a big fan of debt. I don't think we should have any debt. But so as the Treasury bonds are coming up, they have to entice people. They have to entice people to buy them back, to refill the coffers. Now, while that's going on, Jerome said, hey, I'm going to lower interest rates. Now, what those low interest rates did was they created an environment where the equity market will be more profitable. So if they lower interest rates in the short run, because all they're doing is affecting short run interest rates. That way, let's say let's just use UPS. UPS has thousands and thousands of trucks. They can go and tomorrow, if they went and bought a truck, it would be cheaper, the debt service on that truck based on what Jerome Powell did. Okay. So now the truck is cheaper that UPS is driving. So UPS will make a little bit more money. And it's that way with all debt for all corporations. So traditionally, when the rate gets lowered, companies can become more profitable. Not always profitable, but in theory, they should become more profitable because now their debt service is less. Follow me? So now what they're doing is they're creating a market that people want to get into. Because now it's a market that's on the up. So people are like, oh, I'm going to pull my money out and invest it into things like NVIDIA or McDonald's or Kmart. It doesn't matter. I'm just using equities as an example. So when Jerome says, I'm going to lower the rates, it helps the equity market, which means it harms the bond market. So in order for the bond market to retain its money, it has to offer a higher rate to the people to keep their money in the bonds and not let it flee to equities. Okay. So what happens is there's an inverse relationship. So when the rates get lowered, the bond market says, oh crap, we gotta offer a little bit more. We gotta offer a little bit more because people are pulling their money out because they think the stock market's gonna have a run. And that's why your mortgage rates will go up in the short run. Now, when I say the short run, I mean like a few months. So that will affect it for a little bit, and then it'll kind of soften out. And then slowly, that curve will start to go down. But it's a very lagging curve. And it's been that way for as long as I've been involved in this business, and it's been 38 years. So that is why you will see when somebody says, oh, the rates are going to get lower, they're going to get lower, but not for mortgage holders. It's not going to be people that are looking to lock their rate. So if your real estate professional has tied you into a mortgage guy, and the mortgage guy says, hey, rates might be lowered tomorrow, so we're going to wait and hold off on locking your loan. That's the moment you fire him. You hear me, guys? That's the moment you fire your mortgage guy. If your mortgage guy says, hey, tomorrow they're going to lower rates, so we're going to wait to lock your loan tomorrow. It's terrible, guys. It's ignorant people not understanding how finance works, how the markets work. Like I said, guys, I've been doing this a long time. I've been doing this 38 years. I took my real estate course when I was 17 years old. I bought my first share of stock when I was 15 in my grandmother's name. They didn't have Robinhood back then. I used my grandmother's social security number and all that, and that's how I bought my first stock. And my first stock was in a company called Trust America Service Corporation. Later, I bought a company called Checkers. I bought my first nice car with Checkers. I invested $1,000 into it, and it was $4,000 in about 2 weeks. It shot up. It was all because I went and tried a hamburger there. But guys, what I'm trying to say is rates are fickle. The markets do not always react the way you think they're going to react. And you need somebody who's really, really a professional to kind of guide you through that. And most people don't realize, and I don't know how it is in every state, but here in Florida, the free state of Florida, we have a 63-hour course in which somebody can transact and represent you in a real estate transaction. 63 hours, guys. 63 hours. So in 63 hours, they don't teach you anything other than the law. They don't teach you how it actually works. They don't teach you the nuts and bolts of how to, do any of the actual working of being a real estate professional. They just teach you the law so that if you somehow break or violate a law, they can jam you up, they can fine you, they can imprison you, they can deal with you. The law, so the book is just here in Florida. We're going to teach you the law, and if you break the law, then we're going to jam you up. They don't teach you how to actually do real estate. So what you'll find is most people will say, hey, I'm thinking about selling my house. And they will then say to their friend, hey, I'm thinking about selling my house. And your friend will be like, that's awesome. My daughter just graduated from college. Now she's working as a barista at Starbucks, but she went and got her real estate course. And I'm sure she could do a great job for you. And most people are like, oh yeah, I'll let Sally's daughter, help me find a house. What's the big deal? Guys, if you do that, listen, if you allow your friends, your sisters, your uncles, your next door neighbor's daughter or son or grandmother or mother who hasn't done a lot of real estate transactions and took a 63-hour course, if you allow them to handle your real estate course, I want you to ask yourself this question. If you were falsely accused of murder, you're somehow mistakenly, you're a mistaken identity. Somebody figured out that you were, they blame you for a murder that you did not commit. Would you hire somebody just out of law school to represent you in a murder trial just because you don't want them to feel bad that you didn't want to hire your friend's sister or your friend's daughter or your neighbor's best friend or some coworker's father or some coworker's husband or wife? If you would not hire a person just out of law school to defend your murder trial, then why the hell are you hiring somebody to handle possibly the largest financial transaction in your life that literally took a course on weekends for about 4 weeks? It makes absolutely no sense, guys. Hey, if you wouldn't go ahead and hit that like button and follow button. I'm kind of new with this TikTok stuff. I've got a big presence on other things, but I'm kind of new on TikTok. But my buddy Dion's like, you got to go on the TikTok. You got to go on TikTok. I'm like, all right. So I went on the TikTok last week. My buddy Dion sent me this thing. He said, hey, go watch this live video. And I was watching the live video, and the guy was taking questions. So I'm like, oh, well, I'll ask him a question. And I asked him a very simple question. He was in Florida. And I was in Florida. And I thought, I'm going to ask him a question that you should know in Florida if this is your profession. So I asked him a very simple question just to test the waters to see if he had any idea. And I said, how much are doc stamps on a deed? So he had a few questions, and I noticed he skipped past mine. He skipped past my question. And I'm like, I wonder why he skipped past my question. And I realized he's going to the other questions. So then I asked him another question. I think I asked him, what is a Florida, what is an endorsement 8.1? And he skipped past my question. Thanks, guys, for stopping by here. I really appreciate it. So he skipped past my question. And I'm like, well, answer my question. And I'm literally typing, can you not answer my question? And in case you want to know, the doc stamps on a deed are $7 per thousand in Florida. That's just what they are. And the reason I ask that question is because most real estate professionals cannot sit down at a table. So if they go into a listing agreement and they say, well, I want to sell my house for X, whatever X is, it doesn't matter. And the seller says, well, how much will I walk away with? And I know this for fact, guys, because I've been in the title insurance business for decades. I've been at, I don't know how to stress how many real estate agents cannot give you what's known as a net sheet. A net sheet. It's like, how much are you going to net? Well, they can't give you a net sheet because they don't know what the hell they're doing. They can't give you a net sheet because they literally have no idea what's going on. The only thing they're there for is that most agents, not all, most agents are only going to help you pick out what color wallpaper and wall paint you want, maybe advise you if you need a new kitchen, and tell you why the terrazzo floors need to be covered up with vinyl planks or whatever. And then they're going to show up for their commission check. Most agents will not even show up for the closing. Did you hear that again, guys? Most agents, if your agent didn't show up for your closing, you need to give them a terrible review on Google. I don't care. I don't care how well it went, because it could go bad at that closing. And there needs to be somebody in that seat sitting beside you to guide you through and make sure they see your transaction to the end and that they're worthy to get the check they're going to get. So anyways, I asked this guy some simple questions just to see if he could fill out a net sheet. So this guy's on TikTok and he's professing that he, I don't know, is an expert in real estate. He seemed kind of young. I'm not going to hold that against them. When I took my course, I was young too, but I didn't know what I didn't know. So I felt like I was going to ask him some basic stuff to see if he could actually fill out a net sheet to let his client know, hey, you're going to walk away with this amount of money. And it's not complicated, guys. To fill out a net sheet is not complicated. You're going to ask questions like, okay, John, how much do you want to sell your house for? 500,000? Great. 500,000 it is. How much do you owe? 200,000. Okay, 200,000. Now we're down to 300. That's the most you're going to get. We're starting there. Okay. Now the real estate commissions are going to be, let's just say 25,000, Okay. So now we're down to 275. Okay. So we start there. And then there's other things. There's doc stamps on the deed. There's closing fees. There's search fees. There's not that much, guys. There's not that much that somebody who's sitting at that coffee table or that dining room table with you should not be able to answer. And if they can't answer it, if somebody comes in and you ask them that and they can't fill it out right there in front of you, they cannot fill it out right in front of you and give you the number and say, this is it. Then what you need to say to them is, hey, listen, okay, we're gonna consider you, and when we make a decision, we'll let you know. Guys, that will be the greatest decision you make. And then when everybody comes in, put them to that test. Because if they don't know how much you should be getting, how are they going to know what to fight for? How are they going to know how to defend you when the settlement statement, when the Alta statement comes out? If they don't know from the beginning how much you're owed, then how are they going to know how much you should get at that closing? They should be able to tell you that after you sit there with them. Now, if you give them bad information, if you say your mortgage is 200,000, but it's really 225 or 207, that can't be on them, okay? But they should know, okay, well, how much taxes how much are your taxes a year? Okay, well, we're going to prorate those. So your taxes are 12,000. We're closing in June, so we're going to take half, and we're going to take 6,000. So you're going to have to push 6,000 towards the buyer. Okay, well, we should know that. And if they don't understand how the numbers work, how can they fight for you? How can they make sure your numbers were right? If they didn't know that what your net number was, and why I know this is because so many real estate people contact us saying, we need a net sheet. We need a net sheet. We need a net sheet. There's apps out on every title insurance company's page. There's apps, there's portals, there's for net sheets. For net sheets. We're talking about something that the real estate agent should know. I'm not talking about, like, should they have an intimate idea of how the vesting of a property should be, or like, is there some like defect on your title, or is there some hidden lien that they don't know about yet at that table? But they should understand the basics of real estate. And if they cannot share with you that your net number is X, and be damn close based on the information you gave them. If there's information that gets uncovered later on. So when I was a mortgage person, I would do a good faith estimate for my buyers and for my refinancers. And I would sit there at the table, and this is many moons ago. This is about 15 years ago. And I would say to them, if I'm off by more than $100, I'll eat it. That's how confident I was in my ability to understand the transaction. I said, I will eat it if it's off by more than $100. The one transaction that sticks out in my mind is I get a call from the title insurance agency that tells me how much my buyer needs to bring the closing. I was $25,000 off. $25,000. I promised, I actually had it in my literature that I would eat anything over $100. And that day I was like, I can't eat this. I don't, and I'm looking at it, and then I'm like, oh, it's not my bad. Because nobody told me when I sat there that he had to buy a membership in the country club for $25,000 in order to buy the house. So when he bought the house, it came with a country club membership. That was never disclosed to me. That was way outside of the garden variety things that a reasonable person would know. But that was the one time that I learned a valuable lesson. I said, now I always say to people, is there anything else I need to know here? Is there anything else I need to? And I remember that house. The guy's name was John Clayton. John Clayton, I think the mortgage was about 17 or 18 years ago. But I remember John Clayton like it was yesterday because I was puckered, guys. I was like, man, this is crazy. But anyways, the reality is when you hire somebody, just remember that person took a 63-hour course in Florida. It's 50 some places, 75, 80 other places. They took a course that lasted maybe 2 weeks. 2 weeks. They were asked questions that have no relevance to how a real estate transaction goes. How a real estate transaction goes, it's completely irrelevant what they teach you in that class. When the person on the other side knows that they can bully you and get you to do things because they can back out at the last minute or threaten to back out, and then your seller's like, oh my God, but I got a moving truck and I'm on my way. And he says, guys, if your agent hasn't been through the fire and seen how things get resolved and how most transactions matriculate through the process, it won't do you any good to have a newbie, a novice. They can be the smartest people in the world. They can be the best negotiators in the world. They can be somebody who has studied real estate more than anybody could possibly study it, and you could still get at the end because they don't know how the transaction is likely going to end up. Another big one is, how do I get my deposit back? Now I'm going to talk about in Florida because it's different in different places. A big one is, look, the seller won't give me my deposit back. And the seller says, I'm not giving his deposit back. I can tell you, based on the thousands and thousands of transactions that I have seen, I can guesstimate within about probably 80% what's going to happen in that situation. But the other person probably doesn't know if they're new, if they haven't seen it a bunch of times. Now, if you haven't seen something a bunch of times, you don't know from what position to argue or what position to concede something to. So anybody, and this goes back to what I was originally saying, anybody who hires a new real estate agent, hey, if you could hit that follow button, guys, because I'm going to do this every week. I'm going to answer all kinds of questions, and I've got some coming in here. But if you have any questions, I know some people have said some things. Ask me any question. But we've talked about interest rates, why interest rates are go up when Jerome says they go down. We talked about, should I buy a duplex and live in one of them, and what nightmare that could be. It could be a blessing. It could go very, very well, but you also have to understand the pitfalls. And you have to understand somebody who has seen those pitfalls. So if you have any questions, you can find my domain in the bio and shoot me a question. I'll ask anybody. My email address is my name, cliffgephardt@gmail.com. I promise you, I will be as honest and forthcoming. I'll tell you the bad. Most people don't want to hear bad news. But what I learned a long time ago is bad news doesn't wear well. That was a quote from my friend Scott. And another quote from a guy named Tom said, if you need to eat a toad, swallow it whole, don't nibble it, because nobody would want to nibble a toad. They just want to get it gone. So bad news doesn't wear well. If your person is not, if your professional is not telling you things in a candid manner, get rid of them. Now, before we leave tonight, I want to finish with this. 90% of sellers have an overinflated idea of what their house is worth. But here's the problem, guys. Here's the problem. Here's what happens when the seller has an overinflated idea of a house. And this is not, I'm talking about in a regular market, not in these roaring markets where people are bidding up the house and it's almost on an auction. It's gone up so high and crazy. I'm talking about a regular market, guys. Not a market where it's a seller's market and people are putting offers in 10% over what the asking price was. I'm just talking about a regular market. So here's what happens. And it happens all the time. Seller says, my house is worth $1 million. And the agent knows that your house is only worth 900. It's only worth 900. And let's say you're on a declining market. And this is where it gets really bad because we're kind of in a declining, sliding market right now. So he knows it's worth 900, but he's afraid to tell you he would list it at 900 because he knows if he lists it for less than what you are asking in your mind for it, you won't choose him as your agent. He knows that if he says, listen, Bob, I know you think your house is worth $1 million. The neighbor's house sold for 1.2 and the one across the street sold for, 1 million. And I know you've got a really, really nice, kitchen and all stuff, but things change. Often people will reference houses that sold at different times, slightly different houses. No two houses are the same unless you live in a tract home and you're a brownstone or something like that. But there's differences. So an agent will come to you and he'll have a CMA and he'll say to you, what do you think it's worth, Bob? And you'll say, well, I think it's worth $1 million all day long. Oh, I wouldn't never let it go for less than $1 million. Now he takes that information before he comes to you and he says, man, how do I get this listing? Because what they're going to do to you is they're going to take it for $1 million and then they're going to walk you down. Okay. They're going to walk you down to the price that might actually be obtained. Now, nobody wants to hear that. Nobody in their right mind wants to hear that, listen, you're wrong, I'm right, and your house isn't worth $1 million. No home seller wants to hear that because they have a vested interest and they raise their kids in this house. And they're the ones, that put that baseboard on over there. And they have all these attachments to this house that gets them to a number that might possibly not be realistic. But what happens is, here's what happens. Your house goes out on the market and then crickets. And then the seller will say, well, what are you doing? Why? Okay. Here's another secret. Price sells homes. Price sells homes. Nothing else. Doesn't matter how many drones you fly over the house. Doesn't matter how cool the pictures are as you're going through. They help. They'll get some attention. But price sells homes. Price. It's not even the real estate agent that sells the house, guys. The real estate agent does not sell the house. And you're probably like, why am I hiring a real estate agent? I tell every one of my clients, I get paid from the contract to the closing. That's what I get paid for. I get paid to bust my ass and fight like a banshee, like I'm the third monkey getting on the ark to get you to that closing and get you what you were promised at that closing and what you were expecting. That's my job. My job. Yeah, we'll take some pictures. We'll hire some people to take great pictures. We'll have ChatGPT make all kinds of descriptions, and we'll put it out on Zillow, on Redfin, on Realtor.com, and it'll be everywhere. The world will know that your house is for sale. And if it's overpriced, they'll know they're not going to go look at it. That's the reality, guys. So now what happens is, because you, the seller, not you, but the seller has decided they want to overprice their house, and their agent allowed them to do that because he was so afraid that he wouldn't get the listing, because that's very important to agents, because the amount of listings, determines your success, and listings create listings, which is understandable. So now you have a situation where your house has been on the market for 30 days and you've decided to lower the price. Now those things are noticed. Price lowering, time on the market. And if it's in a downward market, this is where it becomes even more detrimental to the seller. Because now maybe when you started 30 days ago, your house was worth 900, but you didn't believe that. You thought it was worth $1 million. So you wrote it until you learned the hard way that your agent was right and that data doesn't lie, because the same data that is used to price a house is the same data that's being used by appraisers to value the house. So, And it's the same value that buyers are thinking your house is worth. Because if you got a 4-bedroom, 3-bath with a pool on the water and it's $1 million, but I can get 5 of them for $920, your house isn't worth $1 million. I don't care how nice your kitchen is, because most people are going to tear all that stuff out. I don't care that you put in this little feature over here. You got a rain shower head. It doesn't matter. The price is the price. The only thing that will sell your house is price. So now you've gone from $1 million, and your house might have been worth 900, but now the market has slid 1%. And now your house is worth 980. I'm sorry, like 990 somewhere, or like, I'm sorry, 890. And now you're like, oh crap. Now I go, most people will say, okay, well, we're at 40,000 or whatever, but they don't get ahead of it. And then they just keep chasing it until one day sense comes to them and they get in front of it. They sell their house. Price sells house, guys. Price sells houses. Anybody tells you they have some secret marketing campaign, if anybody tells you they have some secret way to get your house sold, it's bullcrap, guys. It's absolute bullcrap. It's bullcrap. Now, that might have been true in 1992, before the internet, before data was so readily available. But if anybody tells you that they have some secret pocket of information, they've got the buyer, 9.9 times out of 10, that's not true, guys. That's not true. You need to be treated with honesty and respect, and being treated like an actual human being that has thinking skills by your real estate agent. So they are not going to do anything magical to sell your house. They might do a few things that kind of, expose it to some people, but the world has changed, guys. Nowadays, it used to be, let's say prior to the internet, prior to 1996, where, the internet kind of started, and then, some things went on the internet. The MLS used to be a book, and the book would be delivered, and then the agent would call up their buyer and say, hey, I got the book. I've gone through some things, and let's go look at these 4 houses this weekend. And they'd load up in the Cadillac, and the guy would be with the gold jacket, and they'd go look at the houses. And then there might be a guy that would say, hey, I'm going to get a listing tomorrow, and it might kind of matriculate, and somebody might get a little bit of ahead information. That might have been. But now that's not the case anymore, guys. The internet knows everything before anybody else knows anything, and it's gone. It's on fire. So in a moment's notice of hitting the send button and your house going live, the market will immediately decide if your house is overpriced, underpriced, or priced right. If it's slightly underpriced, you might get somebody who's willing to offer more because they realize it. If somebody is thinking, okay, well, it's overpriced, they're just going to sit around, or they're going to offer you some ridiculous, insulting, offer. So price is important, guys. Don't chase the market down, because we are in a sliding market, and I assume it's going to slide for another, I would say, 2 years. I think 2 years we're going to see a sliding market. You can't have a bull run like we had for, as long as we had it, since pretty much 10 years. For 10 years, we've been running like a scolded horse. It can't go that long. We're going to, we're kind of at the top. We're kind of peaking. We're on the downside. I believe we're going to see 2 years of slide, kind of bring things back into perspective. I think you're going to see rates come down over that time, because when the real estate market cools, so will interest rates. And then you will see a kind of a rebound probably in 2027, 2028. That's my opinion. That being said, I want to leave you with this. Get the mortgage that's right for you and your family. It doesn't matter if it's a 50-year mortgage, an interest-only mortgage, or you pay cash, okay? Don't hire a real estate agent that just got their license because you feel guilty because Martha's daughter went and took her real estate course. And it would be a huge favor. It'd be a huge favor if you would trust her with your house, because chances are she's not going to know what she's going to do, and you wouldn't hire her to handle your murder trial. So that being said, go forth and prosper. If you have any questions, go to cliffgethart.com. You can hit me at cliffgethart@gmail.com. I'll answer any and every question. I've got 25,000 real estate transactions under my belt, guys. And I'm not smarter. I'm not more intelligent. I didn't take more classes. I've just been involved in a lot more transactions than almost everybody. And not just every transaction, but different seats at the table. So when it comes to understanding how to structure a mortgage, I can help you with that. How to vest your house, how to best vest it for if you're going to die or something's going to happen. I mean, I understand that. I was a licensed title agent for 15 years. Give me a call, shoot me a message, go to cliffgephardt.com. You can find out all about me. Have a great day, guys. And